order. Please rise for the entrance of His Worship Mayor Michael Fougere.
Good evening, everyone. We'll begin the meeting with prayer. We beseech thee, Lord, to bestow wisdom upon the members of this council in order that their decisions may be founded in justice and prudence. Amen. Please be seated. Before we begin our formal council meeting, I'd like to turn the podium over to Councillor Hinks.
It's a great privilege for me tonight to recognize a special person and a great role model in our community. Carol Lafayette Boyd may not be a household name, but she is one of Canada's most accomplished amateur athletes. Carol worked for years as a psychiatric nurse. She was in her 30s when she went back to school, taking night classes to complete a social services degree. She spent the next 8 years working towards her social service degree, completing it in 1985. She spent years working with neglected and abused children, training other social service workers in the process. Meanwhile, in 1992, she returned to track and field, and she never looked back. She'd done some track and field in high school and started up again at the age of 50. Part of her master's track program, competitions held all around the world for athletes that are 35 all the way up to 104 years old. Her first race at the age of 50 was the 100-meter dash. She won gold in her age group. Has won more medals than she can count since then, and most of them gold. In 2012, she was inducted into the Canadian Masters Hall of Fame. At that time, she held records in the 60-plus and 65-plus age groups in 9 events. In international meets, she had won 13 championships. She was ranked number 1 in the world in the 4 events she competed in during the 2011 meet in Sacramento. Carol was named Canadian Masters Association Female Track Athlete of the Year in 2007, SAS Sport Masters Athlete of the Year in 2002, 2004, 2007, Saskatchewan Masters Athlete of the Year in 1998, 2004, 2007, 2011. And she won the inaugural Howard West Athletic Award in 2010. After all that, she was just getting started. In 2014, Masters were held in March in Budapest, Hungary. And despite suffering an injury, she traveled to the competition and won gold in her age category in the 60-plus and 200-meter races, as well as in the triple jump, long jump, and high jump. Her time in the 200-meter race was a personal best, and she set the Canadian record in high jump. How does she do it? Carol recently told the CBC that she works out 3 times a week, eats properly, gets lots of sleep, and does a lot of stretching. She says her healthy lifestyle means she feels better now at 71. That's 71, and she's competing, and that she did when she was 35. Carol Lafayette Boyd shows how important a healthy lifestyle really is. She's also a phenomenal ambassador for Regina, Saskatchewan, and Canada. Please welcome me in joining Carol Lafayette Boyd through council chambers.
Before we provide you with a bit more of a thank you for what you've done, I'm going to ask if there's any other members of council who would like to have a word. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Good evening. I'm reminded of a story. I see Larry over your shoulder. So you all know that there's some important people in our lives, and there's some people that are role models. And so I reminded when I saw you, and when I see you often, I'm reminded of a funeral that we were both at, and the young lady happened to teach at Sheldon at the time. And I think she was an important role in your life. I know she was for Larry. So I'm just telling you, I think that that young lady would be looking down upon you now very proudly. Well done.
Councillor Hawkins.
I just brought to briefly add my congratulations and say that for all of us of a certain age, you give us all hope Thank you very much.
You know, what an incredible story. I must admit, I had not met you yet, but I certainly read a lot about you, and Councillor Hinks is the one who insisted that we do this, and of course, Council immediately agreed to do this. But the strength and your resilience, you are a true role model for our city and for our province. And at the very least, we can say thank you. And I'm going to ask you to come forward, and Councillor Hinks to join me at the front. I'm going to have a few things to give you, and simply saying thank you for all you've done for our South, for our city, and our province.
And I know you have some of your medals. Why don't you bring those up here, too?
You have to get a wheelbarrow for that one, but you can bring your family members up if you like as well. If we can give another nice round of applause. Thank you, Councillor Hinks, for bringing this forward. So down to business. If I could have a motion to confirm the agenda, please.
I'll move the agenda.
Have a seconder, please.
Second, Your Worship.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Minutes for the May 5th meeting of Council. Councillor Young moves it. A seconder, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move on to public notice of bylaws and related reports. We have a delegation. Jacqueline Tischer, could you please come forward? Ms. Tischer, if you could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards. If you press the button on... it's on.
Well, hello. Jackie Tischer, Jacqueline Tischer, Executive Director and Founder of Hope's Home. Thank you for having us present tonight. We understand everything went well at City Planning for zoning approval for tonight, so I just wanted to present and just actually say thank you. Hope's Home's children, family, and Board of Directors and staff are very excited about our new development in Harbour Landing. Since 2005, Hope's Home has partnered with the Ministry of Social Services, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, and the Regina Coupal Health Region to provide daycare and respite for children with complex medical needs, supporting their families in care of their special children. In 2013, we expanded to provide daycare services in Prince Albert, which now we just opened 90 spaces as of May 1st. We also opened our first 2 supportive living homes here in Regina. Together we have celebrated many successes and have journeyed together through times of loss. Harbour Landing development is at a point in our city's history that will prove to be another celebrated success. With zoning approval, or anticipated zoning approval, Hope's Home will be able to build a 90-space daycare center with a 10-bed respite supportive living home for children, and also our first group home for young adults with complex medical needs. With 6 locations in Regina now, this development will not only help consolidate some of our services, but also help us expand our daycare spaces and increase our rec program for school-age children in Regina. Harbour Landing is a growing community with many families requiring Daycare. As an early learning complex care center, Hope's Home offers daycare for children with complex medical needs, plus their siblings, and also children within the community. With anticipated zoning approval today, we can move one step closer in the excitement of building hope in Regina. On behalf of the Hope's Home family, we want to thank Dundee, I guess it's now Dream, Stantec, P3A, HB Developments, Devereaux Homes, and the City of Regina for their incredible and ongoing support in this project. Together we are making dreams come true, where we once again are reminded there's no place like hope. So thank you tonight.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor Dowell.
Thanks very much. Good evening. Welcome. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you said, but I have a couple of questions as well in terms of the actual development. So I wanted just to be clear, if you don't mind, about consolidation and expansion. So there are some existing homes. Do they stay? Will they remain? Will College Avenue remain? And is this in addition to, if you would be clear about that, please?
With College Avenue location, I think the change of service will happen there. We're not really clear. It's early in the process. With our wait list for daycare spaces, that's why we don't want to say we're going to close that one down or liquidate it. We may run a smaller center out of there for infants and toddlers, have been the discussion. Also, we looked at it because of the proximity to Jean Vanier. We may run a rec program. So we're not really sure, but we'll definitely function within our contract zoning there.
Okay.
With the consolidation of services, we have to rent office space right now. Those offices will move. The daycare spaces at the Regina Christian School will move out. And yes, there will be some. Expansion, I think the school age program is the biggest one, where we can have more space where we have no space right now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Can I get you to comment as well? Within your opening comments, you talked about the idea that there are daycare spaces for those who are medical needs, but also for others.
That's
comment
correct.
on that, please?
What we have sort of a model of care at Hope's Home, and we really believe and value family and integration. So that means the whole family can attend daycare at Hope's Home. We try to keep our numbers at 40% for complex medical. Then we offer, obviously, for their siblings, so their brothers and sisters can come to Hope's Home. And we also open for spaces for the community. And we have seen that work really, really well. A lot of our complex medical kids don't have siblings, but there are some. And we love seeing kids from the community attend, because children integrated in a typical daycare center, but having the nursing care, we've seen great success with our children there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question is, I'm going to use the word campus. You seem to have a campus developing here, so you can have daycare and go home, but you also have respite.
Yes.
And some, I'll call it longer-term care for some of the other kids. Would you describe that transition and why that's important?
We have seen the need since 2005 of, kind of trying to create a seamless transition from that early years in the daycare up to being approached by the Ministry of Social Services with opening our first home for young adults. What's happened is, and we're finding it already with our children that are hitting 12 and 13, is what's going to happen when they graduate from high school, because they can attend Hope's Home services right up until then. And even for community or their where they live is an issue. Oftentimes they can't remain in their family home. So opening that group home for kids that really have that high medical needs keeps probably young adults out of nursing home settings. So that's a very exciting initiative we have with the Ministry of Social Services.
Okay. Next question is the part that's not that much fun.
Yeah.
Let's talk about parking a little bit.
Yes.
So we talked in planning about a drop-off area, and we asked for some adjustment to that.
Yes.
You have an awful lot of parking spots compared to what we would normally require for development. Are you comfortable with what you have? Will it look after the needs, and will it be a minimum of spill out into the neighborhood or on the surrounding streets?
That was probably one of the number one priorities of our parents, is to get the busyness of the drop-off and pickup. We find even at Hope's Home at both locations, especially for daycare hours. So to create that in the back drop-off, and I believe John can answer it even better as far as they did do some changes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
I'll try to address that. My name is John Aston with A2B Development Consultants. I'm working on behalf of Hope's Home as the development manager for them. I think the total in the report says 9 drop-off spaces. Perhaps 1 or 2 more would be considered that as well in the parking lot. And I think one point as well, the daycare has quite a high staffing complement because there's a high ratio of staff to children. Yes. So again, trying to keep a lot of that on on the site was a big consideration. We worked with the ministry, or with the city, as well to sort of address the concerns along Tudor Way and move it back from the corner of James Hill Road and still have some accessible drop-off spots there as well.
So we have that resolved?
Yeah, I think it's satisfactory for us, yes.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Dow. Other questions or Councilor Hawkins?
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I want to tell you how enthusiastically I support what you're doing. I have one question and then I have one comment I'd like to make. The question is this: can you describe your programming in a little more detail for us so that we understand the philosophy and approach that you bring?
Absolutely. We call it an early learning complex care center, which just is a nice way of recognizing their licensing with our various ministries. But Hope's Home cares for children that need 24-hour nursing care. When we talk about the complex medical child, they're children that have a life-threatening illness. They may have a tracheotomy, they may be on life support, they may have a seizure disorder. We have children that basically, some that are in palliative care. We have children that have had organ transplants. We've had kids that have been diabetics, diagnosed at toddlers. So a variety of medical conditions, so it's not encompassing one, muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, but what categorize these children are those children that if they're not in care directly with their parents, they're in care of a healthcare professional that's specially trained to take care of their medical needs. So providing daycare allows the parents to go to work. It allows them to have that break during the day if they need. We've been able to save many of our families and kept them together by providing just that daycare. They can go to school, whatever they need to do to be successful at parenting. The respite is a huge component. It is our preventative model of care, and respite is allowing parents to have a break that they need. So many of our families have nursing care within their homes at night, so they're always responsible 24 hours a day for the care of their child. So respite is a component that we're very excited about, having 24 hours a day. And supportive living is something new for us too. We were asked with Child and Family Services to help transition children that are in foster care that are complex medical. And these are children that live right now in hospital settings or nursing homes within our province. And instead of living there, they have asked us to create a home-like center or home-like environment where kids live there 24 hours a day. And we work with the Ministry of Social Services either into an adoptive process or transitioning them into another foster family or working with a biological family so maybe they have more success at parenting their children.
Thank you very much.
Does that answer your questions?
It certainly did.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hawkins.
One of the things we're doing in Harbour Landing, and it's the ward I represent in Ward 2, is we're trying to build a new neighborhood.
Yes.
And I think that what you contribute to the young people whom you take care of sets an example to all of us. And I think that having Hope's Home in our neighborhood of Harbour Landing will give us an expression of love for those children and will enrich our neighborhood. And you have my enthusiastic support and best wishes for your project.
Thank you so much.
I thought there might have been a question there, but there wasn't. It was a good statement, though.
Very good.
Councillor Flagel, I believe, next.
Thank you. I'll have a question here, a couple of them. Welcome, of course, and if this goes through tonight, when are you ready to start building?
That's a great question. We're looking at a Phase 3 approach, and John can answer it probably more specific, but Phase 3, as far as 3 of the buildings and when it's going to start, we have approval for the 4-bed group home, which will go up as soon as possible. So we're working on the details of the design. This is part of that process, so I mean, it would be wonderful to say as early as this fall they'll commence construction on that, and then we'll phase in as the funding and that comes along over the next, it'll take probably 2 years at least to build all of this.
That was one of my questions.
Yes.
As to full build-out would be 2 to 4 years?
Talking to the contractors who are involved in this, yeah, they're saying 2 to 3 years is for like completion. We're open.
Question about your funding. Is it
Yes.
is it strictly provincial? Is it donations? Is it what is it? How does it comprise?
We have a combination of capital dollars from the Ministry of Social Services and the Ministry of Education, and also through donations.
So, just for a plug for you, the city would
We would love your
City
support.
people, even the city residents, everybody
Yes.
can contribute, whether it be 10, 20, $50.
Anything would help,
Okay.
and as a charity, we definitely welcome donations.
Obviously, and if I could just ask this of you, obviously, when you started this back out of your basement, basically, because I know you quite well.
Yes.
That, between yourself and my niece and everybody, it was just one of those things. But if you look at where you were then to where you are today, have you built in to this facility expansion beyond
into Harbor
4
Landing.
years? Is there room to either go up, go wide, go near? Have you done that?
You go ahead. I think you can answer it. Yes.
I'll answer tactfully and say the contract zoning probably wouldn't allow that.
Okay.
That we're currently applying for here.
Okay. Okay,
Good answer.
that's good to know.
Very, very good answer.
That's
Yeah.
good to know. That's tactful. Okay. Anyway, I'll make a comment later, but thanks for answering those questions publicly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Other questions? I have one, and thank you for being here. This is a great project. Did I understand you to say that the part of the 90 daycare spaces would be for those who don't have special needs or for children that
That's
are
correct.
for
Yeah.
parents who need that to take care of their children who are receiving treatment?
Yeah, we run about 40% of our spaces are children with medical needs, and then the siblings. So I would say close to 50% end up being open for the public.
Right, okay, good. Thank you very much.
So
You can
Harbor
return-
Landing, call us.
You can return to the gallery and we'll now consider the report. This is D14-54. It's a contract zoning application for proposed daycare center respite care facility. Councilor O'Donnell.
Your Worship, as you just said, and it happens to be located on James Hill Road and Tudor Way and Harbor Landing, Phase 10, Stage 1. So this is on the very edge of town. You'll note from the map, we're getting close to the Campbell Street, and so this is one of the last developments that we'll actually see in this part of the development. I think the delegation told you very clearly about what this is and what it's for. I'm not going to elaborate on that.
Councilor O'Donnell, I just interrupt you to get a seconder for the motion, please.
Sure.
Seconded, okay, good.
I think that was
Please.
unanimous, by the way.
I caught that, yes.
Okay, good. So one of the things I asked the delegation, and you will note in your discussion here, is that there was a change in terms of the drop-off area. So there is no issue, hear me clearly, there is no issue with parking. I don't think you've ever heard me say that before. The number of spots far exceeds whatever requirement is, and it goes beyond that. But there was still a concern about how it would work within the area, and so we asked the drop-off zone to move 15 meters, and I feel assured today that that has happened and been looked after. If you missed it, there's no parking problem, okay? So we have a campus. I'm going to use the word campus, although it's not in here. We have a campus because children can transition, and that's extremely important in this area. You notice that there's a breezeway and so on for the area around. I think it's very respectful. When I get to the next report, you'll talk a little bit more about the area around here and what is possible. This is critical, this is important, and this is good. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Councilor Murray.
Your Worship, I just want to recognize one of the last comments that our delegation talked about was the 40%. I think it was 40% of the participants in the daycare have needs, special needs. That means 60% of those children have the opportunity to be exposed to children who have special needs, and I think that's fantastic because it really opens up their eyes to just what life really could be like and how fortunate they are. When I think about my own children, how healthy and normal and just, what if you were a parent with a child who had struggles? I mean, it just makes you realize how fortunate we are, and the fact that there's a facility that allows children to be able to share the same space, and I think that opens up the minds and hearts a whole lot more. So I'm really appreciative of the work that they do, 100% support.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Councilor Flagel? Thank
you. And there was no parking issue, right? Councilor O'Donnell? Appreciate that. Excuse me. This project is a little bit dear to me because I've had people go through the system in there that are part of my world. But when I look back at the goal and dream that this woman had back when she started, I don't think you ever thought it was going to get to this size. I mean, you were going to start it out in a basement kind of a thing, and now all of a sudden she's provincial. Next is crossing borders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So hats off to you. the administration. You got a great group to work with, so hopefully we can put this together. Council, I'm hoping for full support because this is just a fantastic project. That there are so many kids out there that need, and not just the kids. We talked about the kids. The parents need a break. The respite gives the parents a week holiday. Terry and I are, Councilor Hinks and I are involved with Easter Seal, and that is the same type of program. The kid goes out for the week, the parents get a break. This is the same thing, only it's right in the city. And I just can't imagine being a parent that these nights that you've got to go through every day hoping and wishing that your child survives another day. So hats off to Jackie and her staff. And for all those that are going to donate, I'm sure you can get a hold of her at Hope's Home. So I appreciate it, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. I just wanted to rise to encourage everybody, obviously, to support this. I also have known Jackie a very long time. We used to work in MPICU together at the General Hospital, so I know that the love that she has in this project and what she gives our community. So we talk about building complete communities. This is part of our community, and I think we really need to have a place in our community for Hope's Home. Not only does it provide support for the kids, the families, it also employs people as well. So I think that, as I said, what a great way to complete a community.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other speakers? I'll just say something very quickly here from the chair that I remember this initial story, this application coming here a few years ago on College Avenue. And I'll just, I think, repeat the spirit of what people have said here. A vision, a dream, and is coming to reality. So I think from our perspective, you'll get unanimous support for an excellent project that is something that's so much needed in our community. Councilor Downing, do you need to close debate? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. On to our next report. For Councilor Dowell, CR 1455, another zoning bylaw amendment.
That's right. This is the area around what we have just approved. This is some additional land. You know that when we begin, everything is put in terms of urban holding. So you'll see that we're trying to change some land around here to a suburban narrow lot, a direct control district, some to residential medium density, and some to residential multiple housing. There's also a parcel in there that's noted GG in Block 72. The reason I highlight that one is that there is a hope, a desire, that that would be a seniors complex as well. So from, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but from birth to the next stage of life, we're kind of covered here. So that is that notion of complete community. The other part that I point out is the number of dwelling units has increased, the number of residents increased. I always take the opportunity here to see how this area of the city has changed virtually, has changed significantly in the amount of density, but also what's coming in here. So we had no issue with this, made for perfect sense with Planning Commission. Would look for concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councilor Young. Seconder for the motion.
I second the motion.
Councilor Young seconds that. Speakers on the motion, on the report. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move on to 1456, a contract zone.
Yeah, this is a contract zone, proposed additional dwelling unit, an apartment building at 1936 Cameron Street. I'll ask for a seconder and then I'll speak to
Seconder,
this.
please.
I'll second.
Councilor Hinks seconds it. Councilor Donald.
Thanks very much. So there is a plan that went back a little ways here in terms of how many units would be in this building. And so there's been some back and forth between Planning Commission and the developer. The building has opened, has room for an additional unit. We have the support of the community, and we would look for concurrence in this as well to add the 9th unit.
Thank you, Councilor Donald. Any comments or questions on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have bylaws. Councilor Young. We have 3 bylaws.
3 bylaws. And so I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that bylaw 2014-37 be introduced and read a first time.
Doesn't need to be. Someone else can say.
Okay, then
Yes.
I'll just change the name. Okay. I move, seconded by Councillor Bryce, that bylaw 2014-37 be introduced and read a first time.
Thank you for that. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Pursuant to the authority outlined in the Planning and Development Act of 2007, Council will now consider bylaw 2014-37, which would allow for the development of a ninth dwelling in the existing apartment, whereas the existing contract zone restricts the number of dwellings to 8. If there is anyone in the chamber who wishes to address Council on this matter, I would ask that you indicate your interest in doing so and await an invitation from the Mayor to address Council. I see no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call the question on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Young.
I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that bylaw 2014-37 be read a second time.
Any comments on this? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that Council hereby consent to bylaw 2014-37 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that bylaw 2014-37 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Young.
I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that 2014-39 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Pursuant to the authority outlined in the Planning and Development Act 2007, Council will now consider bylaw 2014-39 respecting the proposed rezoning to allow for a multi-purpose facility and accommodate a daycare center, a respite care facility, a supporting living home, and accessory offices for Hope's Home. If there's anyone in the chamber who wishes to address Council on this matter, I would ask that you indicate your interest in doing so at this time. I see no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call the question on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Young.
I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that bylaw 2014-39 be read a second time.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that 2014-39 go to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that bylaw 2014-39 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Last bylaw.
Okay. I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that 2014-40 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Pursuant to the authority outlined in the Planning and Development Act 2007, Council is now considering bylaw 2014-40 respecting the proposed rezoning of lands in Harbour Landing to accommodate a variety of housing options as outlined in the Harbour Landing Concept Plan area. Again, if there's anyone in the chamber who wishes to address Council on this matter, I would ask that they indicate their interest at this time. There appears to be no one, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'll call the question on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that 2014-40 be read a second time.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. I rise to oppose this bylaw. I have a concern about Harbour Landing, and it's this. In 2007, prior to the economic crisis, a concept plan was developed for Harbour Landing. Following that, the economic crisis came along and the economy changed quite dramatically. As a result of that, the 2007 concept plan for Harbour Landing didn't appear to be working as it was intended to work. Through many seriatim discretionary use applications, changes were made in that concept plan that affected particularly the south part of Harbour Landing. It's my belief that those steady changes to what was in effect the concept plan has meant that we have proceeded with Harbour Landing in a way that is largely unplanned. Or maybe better put this way, rather than being planned according to a coherent whole, has been planned bit by bit by bit. I believe that the end result of that is that particularly in the later stages of Harbour Landing, we have a development that is much too dense. I think it will prove that the roadway system is not adequate. I think parking will be a problem in the later stage development of Harbor Landing. I think it will be difficult to create neighborhoods with the density that exists in the latter part of Harbor Landing. As a result, Mr. Mayor, I rise to oppose this. In doing so, I recognize that in some ways the ship has already left the dock. We're right at the end of the development of Harbor Landing. I make these points simply to point out that when we're going ahead with future subdivision projects, I hope we learn from past errors, and I hope we learn from what's happened in Harbor Landing. So for those reasons, Mr. Mayor, I'll oppose the bylaw change.
Thank you. I'll call the question on first and second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Fraser, that Council hereby consents to bylaw 2014 going to third reading at this meeting.
Call the question on third reading, which requires unanimous agreement. All those in favor? Opposed? The bylaw will be set aside for next meeting of City Council for consent then. Thank you, Councillor Young. We'll move to delegations. Under delegations, bylaws, and related reports. Report Delegation 14-48, Chad Novak. Ms. Novak, if you could state your name, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions of council after.
Test. Still going to get used to this thing. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of council, members of the public. My name is Chad Novak, and I am here representing the Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, which is a grassroots organization that is intended to bring a level of accountability and transparency to our municipal governments. You can find more information on our efforts at chadforregina.com. This evening, you have before you a recommendation to approve a report on the 2013 General Operating Fund results, which includes such items as an $85 million utility reserve and a $17 million land development reserve, just to point out 2 startling figures. Now, it is our genuine concern that, given the results laid out before you tonight...
Mr. Novak, you may be on the wrong report. We're looking at Report 57, which is on the Finance Administration property tax exemptions based on boundary alterations. I think you're on a different report.
Oh, you are correct. Sorry, I apologize for that.
So I'll start you over for your 5 minutes.
Start over here. Too much paper. Okay, let's try that again. My name is Chad Novak. I'm the founder of the Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, which is a grassroots organization that is intended to bring a level of accountability and transparency to our municipal governments. You can find more information on our efforts at chadforregina.com. This evening, you have before you a recommendation to approve property tax exemptions to the tune of $686,077.28 just for the 2014 year alone. This is due to annexation of lands that many residents have raised concerns about, given that it has not been demonstrated to them that there is an actual need for these extra lands. We are very cognizant of the fact that we have an affordable housing and homelessness crisis in our fair city. However, that is not intended to be used as justification to simply annex lands at your free will, nor is it an excuse to encourage further housing development, regardless of the market price, or considering the very real barriers to entry in our current housing market. I referenced the Housing First initiative that is proven worldwide and is only now being implemented in Regina due to a requirement by the federal government to do so. Many other jurisdictions also have the province and municipalities assisting with the Housing First initiative financially, but it appears as though this is not the situation here in Regina or in Saskatchewan, unfortunately. Upon a detailed review of the list of properties included in the report before you this evening, it seems as though this is not being done in a fair and equitable manner with the rest of the citizens of Regina. And it is our genuine concern that these exemptions are being offered to individuals, companies, or organizations that simply do not financially require these exemptions. Of course, these landowners would argue that they are entitled to the exemptions, given that they aren't being provided the same level of services as other service lots in Regina. But This is also the same concern that your very administration have raised with the desire for Wascana Village, for example, to be built just to the southeast of our city limits. Now, if it can be demonstrated that these landowners are actually some of the parties that formally requested that the City of Regina annex their lands in the first place, then it would be reasonable to assume that they should have been cognizant of the potential financial implications of such a request. Surely the City of Regina would have provided them full disclosure on both the pros and the cons of annexation during the due diligence process of the annexation. It is our genuine concern that this is unfair to other taxpayers in the City of Regina who have requested similar tax exemptions or other assistance by the City of Regina and have been refused for a number of different reasons. Other perceived unfair exemptions, most notably, of course, would have been the Saskatchewan Rough Riders, the Regina Airport Authority, and the Royal Regina Golf Course, the latter of which, thankfully, was denied by your administration. We currently have a situation in Regina that is unacceptable to many taxpayers on a socially responsible level, but also on a moral level. We have crumbling roads around us, core infrastructure that needs desperate attention, and a pension deficit in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet our administration doesn't seem to bat an eye at approving record debt for a stadium, tax breaks for those that have failed to demonstrate the financial need for those breaks, and taxpayers that are being told that they must pay thousands of dollars out of their own pocket to get their basic infrastructure restored to the condition that it was when those properties were built some 50 to 75 years ago. Now, I don't know about you, but I would consider yourselves lucky that the taxpayers of Regina haven't started a tax revolt, similar to how businesses did back in the 1980s, which ultimately led to the elimination of the business tax. This is a democracy that we live in, and all taxpayers deserve fair and equitable treatment. And I would respectfully request that this be considered this evening when you vote on this recommendation before you, and deny every single request in full. Thank you for your time, and I will gladly answer any questions or concerns you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Novak, for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? There are none. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now proceed with report 57. Councilor Murray, you want to bring that forward?
Thank you, Worship. I rise to bring forward CR 1457, and this is boundary alterations for the 2014 property tax exemptions. If I can have a seconder, I'll go through.
Seconder for that, please. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Hawkins. What we have from the Finance Administration Committee, there's two parts to it, Your Worship. The City Council approved the property tax exemptions that are outlined within this report, and a part two, that the City Solicitor be instructed to forward the necessary bylaw to provide for those property tax exemptions that are listed in Appendix A, B, and C. Now, Your Worship, just by way of just a little bit of explanation through the discussion, these property exemptions are there to protect the property owner whose land's been annexed by the City of Regina from unreasonable financial hardship. Now, to make this quite simple and quite clear to the layperson, if your land is located within the RM, your tax is based on what SAMA comes up with as the value for your land. SAMA is the Saskatchewan Assessment Management Association. So that group puts together the value of your land, and you're taxed based on that. When you get annexed into an RM, all of a sudden now your property is going to be taxed at the rate within the RM. That would, of course, make it unfair. If you've got several acres of farmland, as an example, you can't be expected to pay the same amount of tax on farmland that you would on your lawn or on your backyard or your home. It obviously wouldn't be fair. So this allows us to utilize those tools that are available within our grasp to be able to go in and correct that. So that, again, people are being taxed fairly and correctly. Over time, if that farmland is now turned into residential, obviously it's going to be taxed at the correct rate. We have to make sure things are fair and equitable, and that's really what this is. Your Worship, I would ask everyone to please agree with this and move this forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Other speakers to this? Councillor Hawkins.
Your Worship, I'll be brief, and I want to echo the words of Councillor Murray. I put it this way. This is not really about a tax exemption at all. I'd like to assure the citizens of Regina that we are not exempting any group here from taxes in the sense of giving something away. Instead, what this is about is, as Councillor Murray has pointed out, tax fairness. We see it would simply not be fair to tax these newly annexed lands at the same rate as we tax lands that have been within the boundaries of the City of Regina for many years, simply because we do not yet provide the services to these newly annexed lands. So what's the solution? You create a certain period of time when you exempt them from tax because they aren't getting the services that others are getting, and when those services come on stream, these people will be taxed in the same way as everybody else. Your Worship, this is about fairness. It's not about exemption, and I support the motion entirely.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other speakers? Councillor Fraser?
All right, thank you. Just a quick question for administration. In the appendices, the fourth column in is the percentage of the value of the land that's exempt, and it seems that for every property there's a different formula as far as how much exemption we're giving to get from their tax burden today as an RM land to eventually 5 years from now what they'll pay as full price for being city land. I'm just wondering if somebody could explain why each property has a unique exemption. Thanks.
Mr. Archer, do you want to try that, or? I'm going to put you on the spot, being the first question you've been asked.
Thank you for the opportunity, Your
Barr.
Worship. Staff have prepared the report and are prepared to respond to the question.
Mr. Barr.
Through your Worship. Back when the annexation was being discussed, one of the principles the Council passed and moved forward with is the principle that the taxes would remain the same for the annexed properties. So the exemptions were calculated for each property to result in the same taxes, municipal taxes at the same level as the RM. So you'll see a different percentage for each property. It's a result of two things. One is the difference between the tax rates between the RM and the city, and the other is a difference in the assessments, as Councillor Murray alluded to. Once the properties are within the city limits, they're subject to the assessment rules and the comparables and the land values that are within the city limits. So it had an impact. So all of the assessments on these subject properties were examined and changed, and this is simply living up to the commitment that was made prior to the annexation that there would be no negative financial implications for those properties that are being annexed into the city.
Councillor Fraser?
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Donald?
Thanks, Your Worship, and Mr. Barr did a good job of answering my question before it was asked, but I'm curious about 5 years. Was there something magic about a 5-year period as compared to 3, 10, or whatever?
It's the limit of our authority, I believe.
That's
through Your Worship, 5 years is the limit that Council can approve an exemption by agreement.
And I thought so too. And so, and can I also ask, is this consistent when other jurisdictions in Saskatchewan have annexed property? Are we aware of that, please?
Through Your Worship, it's certainly very comparable to the prior annexation that we had in Regina. The last 2 annexations, we did do similar exemptions for the properties that were annexed in.
Thank you. I think at the time that we signed the documents on November 6th, we were very consistent about this. I'm very comfortable with what's before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Other speakers? Councillor Young, could you take the chair for a moment, please? Just want to.
Mayor Fougere.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. I want to bring members of council and the public back to our discussion in November when we looked at annexation and finally decided to on the boundaries. We had what's referred to in our report as tax mitigation principles, and after hearing many delegations speak of not so much their unwillingness or willingness to be annexed inside the city, but the implications on taxes for them. So we asked the administration to look at this and come forward with a set of principles that would guide us to be fair and reasonable. So saying much of what other members of council have said, this is about fairness and about reasonableness. It's not about exemptions. It's about a phase-in of taxes from a certain level of taxation where they receive services not like ours at all to a 5-year phase-in. Victoria Avenue East, Dudney Avenue businesses will be phased in for taxes over 5 years to City of Regina taxes. It's about fairness and equitability. Other areas around the city that we've annexed that are residential, 5-year phase-in when it will be imminently developed in the very near future, phase-in over 5 years. It's completely unreasonable for us to expect that those who would not be developed within our city limits for 10 or 15 years to automatically receive a bill for services without receiving those services firsthand. This is about fairness, equitability, and this is a principle we talked about before we passed annexation. We're simply bringing forward those principles into a report, into a bylaw that will allow people to not face hardship, but to have those taxes phased in over a period of time. Yes, we have one element of a 5-year exemption, possibility of 15 years in total. But again, those areas will not be developed for a number of years to begin with, and it would be undue hardship and completely unfair for us to tax them at city rates in the next 5 or 10 years. So I certainly support the report. It's very consistent with what we passed as a council last year. Other speakers to the report? Councilor Murray to close debate.
No, I think we've spoken eloquently.
I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? So if you once again identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and you may have questions after.
Okay, there we go. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Chad Novak, and I am the founder of Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, which is a grassroots organization that is intended to bring a level of accountability and transparency to our municipal governments. You can find more information on our efforts at chadforregina.com. This evening, you have before you a recommendation to approve a report on the 2013 General Operating Fund results, which includes such items as a $85 million utility reserve and a $17 million land development reserve, to point out only 2 startling figures. It is our genuine concern that, given the results laid out before you tonight, there was no reasonable justification for the property tax increase this year or last, or the utility rate increases over the past number of years, and also which is anticipated over the next couple of years at minimum. We have tens of millions of dollars in our quote-unquote savings account, to use a layman's term, that we are doing absolutely nothing with. It should be noted that in your 5-year projections, even the utility reserve isn't expected to be depleted significantly, which raises some serious concerns, as this is the reserve that should have been or should be tapped into for major capital projects such as the much debated P3 wastewater treatment plant upgrades. It also raises some major concerns amongst taxpayers who are currently paying between 50 and 70% more than our counterparts in some parts of Western Canada, just to be granted the ability to turn on that tap and have fresh drinking water, as well as water for everyday uses such as laundry and bathing. The justifications that our current and previous councils have provided to the taxpayers just don't hold water, pardon the pun. We hereby request that, based on the information before you in this report, you request City Administration to revisit the 2014 property tax increases and the utility rate increases, not only for 2014 through 2016, but also for the past several years. It would be our desire to have Regina fall back in line with other municipalities of similar size in Canada. This would require an immediate cut of at least 50% to our water rates, and we would gladly meet with you to discuss our request in further detail, if it is determined that this is actually something that the council feels appropriate for the taxpayers of our great city. As stated previously, we are only wanting fair and equitable treatment for all taxpayers of Regina. And we feel, that basic needs such as tap water and reasonable tax rates in relation to the services that are received are just reasonable requests in order to provide a socially responsible governing body and to return Regina to being one of the most cost-effective municipalities in all of North America to live and do business in. Thank you for your time, and I would gladly answer any questions or concerns that you may have tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Novak. Are there questions of the delegation? There are none. You can return to your gallery.
Thank you.
And we'll consider the report. Councilor Murray, on 58, which is the 2013 General Operating Fund.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I do rise to bring forward report number 58. This is the 2013 results of our General Operating Fund. And so, Your Worship, I'll just get a seconder and I'll...
Seconder for that, please, yes.
A little explanation. Okay. Councilor Hinks, thank you very much for seconding. So this report that's provided to us, Your Worship, is there's a lot of material in here, but to suffice is to say that the city's actual revenues that we generated, now again, there's budget and there's actual. The actuals were about $354.5 million. We spent of that, the expenditures, to provide the services we provide to the citizens of Regina, about $352 million. Now, Your Worship, that's a difference of about $2.5 million that is on the positive. So let's understand that budgeting for a municipality is obviously different than it would be for the provincial government or for the federal government, where they can budget a deficit. Cities can't do that. Cities cannot budget a deficit. So we must always come in as close as we can. Obviously, we don't want to overburden the taxpayer. We're talking about 0.7%, Your Worship, that we made sure we found efficiencies, that we were careful with every tax dollar invested with us, and we ensured that the citizens receive the very highest value. So, Your Worship, that percentage difference is 0.7%, and that makes up the surplus of about $2.4 million. Now, obviously, to operate a city of our size, we need to have surpluses. If we're going to budget, we want to budget with a surplus, never with a deficit. So we also need to make sure that we have reserves in place, because there are eventualities, there are things that happen that we require to have money in the bank in case we need it. So what you have before you, Your Worship, is a very balanced budget that came through. As we went through the whole process of the year, we found efficiencies, and in fact, we came in under budget by 0.7%. Your Worship, I ask that our colleagues all approve this report, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Other speakers on this report? Councilor Fraser.
Thank you. Just a couple questions here. So the report mentions that we had a $2.4 million surplus this year. Also, in the general operating fund document we have here, it talks about reserve transfers. And then 2013, there was a decrease of $1.5 million to the general revenue reserve at the end of the year. So can someone just relate those two numbers to me? Is 2.4 the surplus, or is it actually 0.9? Or
We're just going to try that one.
Page, the end of page 4 on the general operating fund document. Sorry, that's the end of page 3, rather.
Just one moment here while...
Your Worship, Ms. Schmallenberg and Ms. Aird will respond to that for us.
Ms. Schmallenberg?
So you, Mr. Worship, my understanding is your question is what was the actual surplus that was transferred to the general fund reserve?
That's correct, thanks.
It was the 2.4 million, 2,431,000.
Okay, and that's including, as mentioned here, that the reserve transfer, that the general fund reserve was down by 1.5 million?
Oh, down 1.5 from last year.
Okay.
So that includes all ins and out of the reserve
Okay,
from
sure.
last year compared to this year.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Just one other question. Mr. Novak brought up the idea of our utility reserve. Could someone just explain the dynamics of the money we're saving and how it's, how it's been accumulated over the past few years and when it will be spent? Thanks.
Ms. Schmallenberg, do you want to try that as well?
The utility reserve is obviously completely separate from the operating fund, so the comment was made about the tax dollars. The utility reserve doesn't have any impact on where we set our tax rates. The utility fund is set to be self-sustaining, so the utility rates intentionally are planned to provide an amount of surplus that goes into the utility reserve to provide future capital costs. And obviously, we have a wastewater treatment plant and other significant capital costs. Coming up in 2014, very quickly, we actually have a $43 million SIGI debt repayment. That was debt that was taken out in 2009. So that, for example, will come out of this $85 million surplus.
So right now, the utility reserve is sitting at plus 85 million. Is that right?
That's correct.
And in the coming years, is there a short answer to where that number will be, say, between now and the end of building the new wastewater treatment plant?
I don't have the specific number in front of me as to what the reserve is going to decrease, but there is a significant decrease, obviously, between now and 2017, and even past that into 2018 and 2019 to pay for a part of the wastewater treatment plant.
We can get that information out by directive.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other speakers? Councilor Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for administration that now that we're entering into some very major projects with the stadium, the RRI, wastewater treatment, we're beginning to start to spend money. Will we be making any sort of alterations or changes to how we display our financials so that the public can sort of track and see kind of how we're moving forward? Because sometimes we've already had some expenditures, but they tend to get lost in the financial statements. So it's kind of in for next year thinking.
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of Council, the information that is presented tonight reflects generally accepted accounting principles and standards anticipated that all municipalities would follow, and we will continue following. But in terms of additional information or context, I do anticipate that we will have conversations about our financial condition, and that includes looking long range at our financial plans and the influencing factors that affect our financial position. So that will involve conversations with members of Council and the public about, for example, indicators of financial condition that are recommended by the Public Sector Accounting Board that help translate the consequences of the choices we make on our financial condition. And so what I can anticipate is more and deeper conversations with you about the effects of our plans as we implement them in ways that I anticipate will make it easy for everyone to understand the relationship between the services we're providing and the costs required for funding them at those levels.
Councilor Burnett?
I think you've kind of answered it. It's just so that there's certain, I think there's a couple projects in particular, like the stadium, where the people are always very concerned about on time, on budget. Will we have kind of a specific project tracking mechanism for the financial side, just so that we can keep tabs?
Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, excuse me, certainly in relation to the two large projects mentioned, one element related to the stadium that we talked about is a separate reserve to track the revenues and expenditures of the stadium project over a long time period. So the transparency of that information, the financial results of that project will be available. Of course, as we stand today, the utility itself is tracked separate of the city proper in terms of the taxpayer-related funds. That'll continue, but the utility itself, of course, includes a number of other elements other than just the plant. So nothing in it anticipated individually for the plant itself, but that will be captured in the overall utility results.
Thank you, Councilor Burnett. Other questions on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have D 14-50, Judith Versak. She's here to answer questions only on the report 59, which is the Downtown Visual Identity Guidelines. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Versak? Looks like you're getting out pretty easy tonight. A motion to receive and file the report? Councilor Fraser, you do have a question. Apparently you're not. Will you just come forward and identify yourself?
Judith Versak with Regina Downtown Business Improvement District.
Councilor Fraser, go ahead.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks for coming out. I'm just wondering if you could speak to these types of guidelines and are there other Canadian examples that you're aware of?
Absolutely. A lot of downtowns out there will create design guidelines when they know that they're coming upon significant capital investment in their downtown. Obviously, when a community wants to invest in their downtown, they want to do it once and do it right. And the intent of this project is to make sure when we do invest in improvements to our downtown, everything is consistent or conveys the look and feel that we as a community want to convey. So we are thinking very much in the future as to how the public realm will evolve.
Okay, and as for when we talk about public realm, what are we talking about exactly? What would these guidelines apply to?
These would govern, let's see, things like benches, chairs, other seating elements, trash receptacles, recycling receptacles, wayfinding signage, so that's something that we're working on quite diligently right now. Any identification signage, things like heritage markers and stuff like that, bicycle racks, perhaps newspaper boxes, planters, banners, and other infrastructure that we notice as we go through the study. We are researching what other communities do in terms of, I guess, new and improved, new ways of doing things, and if there are things that we haven't identified from the outset that other communities are doing, that's something that we'll definitely look at doing as well.
Okay, and this would apply to private investment in these things as well?
For the most part, this is directed towards public investment. However, there are quite a few significant public or private investment happening in downtown, like FCC Tower 2 or Agriculture Place. This document, the design guidelines from this that are generated from this, will help the city administration direct the developer as to how they want their contribution to the public realm amenity. They will be able to direct them as to what they need to purchase.
Okay, and supposing a small business, let's say, wanted to put in a bike rack or a garbage can or something that didn't fit these guidelines, would that be hard for them to do with these in place? Or
I think it's something that we could work with them on. If you look at the Lululemon bike rack, that's obviously something that is unique to that location. And I think there's always opportunity to celebrate the uniqueness of our downtown and our downtown businesses. So I think that's something that we could work with administration on if and when those proposals come forward, because we don't want to squash individuality and I guess private investment in people's properties.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you, Ms. Veras. You can return to the gallery, and we'll proceed with Report 59 on the Downtown Visual Identity Guidelines. Councilor Murray.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just 1 second. Get this thing to find its way. Sorry. Get back to the report. Here we are. Got her now. Thanks, Your Worship. Rise to bring forward 1459. This is the funding request for the Downtown Visualization Identity Guidelines. If I have a seconder, I'll
Seconder, please. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Councilor O'Donnell. The recommendations coming from Finance Administration Committee was that there's $34,000 be transferred from the Downtown Deferred Revenue account and paid to the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District to support the Downtown Visual Identity Guidelines project, and that's recommended within the report. Your Worship, there's a second part that the City of Regina entered into an agreement with the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District to govern and manage the Downtown Visual Identity Guidelines project and the future use of the ownership of that project deliverables. This will be negotiated at the discretion of the Executive Director and the Community Planning within the development, Your Worship. So those are the recommendations coming from Finance Administration. We look for concurrence in them, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Speakers to the report. Councilor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. If someone could just give a quick overview of what the account that this money is coming out of, if someone could just quickly explain what that is. Thanks.
Through you, Your Worship, the Downtown Deferred Revenue account was established when the downtown plan was created. Funds that are done with developments in the downtown for amenities, the money goes into that account. So when Hill Tower was built, the second Hill Tower, monies went into that account specifically to improve our downtown area. When the office area policy was revamped, we also amended the policy to increase parking standards, so that if somebody wanted to go over the maximum parking standards in an office area, they would pay $7,000 per stall into this account. And the whole purpose of this account is to do improvements in our downtown.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Orlock.
Does all of this relate to that the parking piece, the $7,000 per stall, or are there other ways for money to enter this fund?
Ms. Orlock?
Through you, Your Worship, at this point, there's only those two mechanisms at this point for money to get into the account.
Okay. We've recently talked about density bonusing as well. I guess the parking piece, I guess, is somehow related to that too, but potentially money might go into this through density bonusing.
Ms. Orlock?
Through Your Worship, if the policies were to come forward with respect to density bonusing, that could be an option that could be explored.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other speakers to the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The bylaw, Councilor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move, seconded by Councillor Hinks, that bylaw 2014-41 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaw 2014-41 be read a second time.
Questions or comments on this? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that council hereby consents to bylaw 2014-41 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Bryce, that bylaw 2014-41 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Young. We'll move on to report 60. This is this would be executive committee, so this would be Councillor Young again. Purchase of a service vehicle for the radio shop.
This is a recommendation of the executive committee that the chief of police and city manager be authorized to purchase and retrofit a new service vehicle for the radio shop operation at a cost of approximately $30,000, funded from the Regina Police Service Radio Equipment Reserve. They have 2 cars that they use to service the radio operations across the city. One of them is 15 years old and is no longer safe, and so it needs to be replaced. So this authorizes the chief of police and city manager to make that purchase.
The seconder for the report, please. Thank you. Any comments or questions on the report? Pretty straightforward. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 64 on the school board city liaison committee membership. Councillor Young.
Okay. Your Worship, CR 1464, this authorizes members of the Regina Public School Board to become members of the School Board City Liaison Committee. And the 4 appointments are Ms. Julie McRae, Ms. Deborah Burnett, Ms. Catherine Gagne, and Mr. Dale West. And it also further says that the members continue to hold office for the term indicated or until their successors are appointed, and that term ends on December 31st, 2014.
Thank you for that. A seconder, please. Councillor Young seconds that. Questions on this report or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to report 1461. This is the 2013 annual report. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward the 2013 annual report. If I could have a seconder.
Seconder, please.
Somebody? Anybody? Got to be taker out there. Thanks, Councillor Hawkins. This report, Your Worship, has 2 stages to it, and that's the 2013 annual report be approved by City Council. Second part, that the Director of Finance be authorized to finalize the annual reports, including financial statements with the auditor. Your Worship, I noticed our auditor is actually in the audience as well, so I appreciate that they're here doing the due diligence they do. Within the Appendix A of the report, Your Worship, you find a tremendous piece in there that goes through the detailed finances of how the city operates. But I want to draw to attention to my colleagues here the attachment that we have in our documents here, and it would be a 2013 annual report presentation to finance. Now, I'd asked that this, actually Finance Administration asked that this be brought to Council so that we go through, because it's a fantastic document that really, when I scroll down into the tail end of it, it discusses in here, Your Worship, the flexibility in the ability for the city in the way that we've reduced the ratio of funding that we require from other sources and how that's continuing to drive downward over the last four years. And going further on to talk about the vulnerability that we as a city have reduced our vulnerability by upwards of 25% down to about 12.5%. So, Your Worship, we're reducing our reliance on other sources, other governments, simply because we've got a much better system before us. And so that report goes into a lot of detail. Obviously, we don't have the time to go through it here, but to those citizens out there that would like to take a look at that report, it is available online. And, of course, there's a tremendous amount of material in there discussing how it is that your finances are invested for your community. And it's all right here, Your Worship. Very transparent, which is something, again, we're very proud of as a municipal government. When we go outside of municipal governments, we often find it's difficult to get information provincially, federally. Very clear. It's all concise and right there. Thanks, Your Worship. I ask for our members to consider approval of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Questions on this report? Councillor O'Donnell.
I just want some clarity, if I could, please. So on this report, who else checks it besides us? So where does this go? For example, is there any other national organizations that look at this?
Tomorrow morning,
Ms. Mellenberger, please.
through you, Your Worship, tomorrow morning, as soon as this is approved, we'll send it to the Government Finance Officers Association. This is an association that works to make sure that municipalities have excellence in financial reporting. We've received the award from that organization 21 years in a row. Another one that we'll look at is the Frontier Report, and they're looking for transparency. Our 2011 report was tied for third, and this year we were tied for fourth. Those are the only two, and occasionally, of course, the province and any other organization that asks to see it, but those are the two that we routinely send it to.
So I just want it noted that we have staff who win awards for the work that they do and how transparent this is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other questions, comments? I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 62, this is a flood emergency damage reduction funding agreement. Councilor Bryce.
Thank you. I bring forward CR 14-62, which is Emergency Flood Damage Reduction Funding Agreement. I'll just read the recommendations, and then I'll explain a little bit about what it's all about.
Have a seconder for it, if that's okay? Councilor Young, thank you.
City Council authorized the acting executive director of city operations or his or her designate to negotiate and approve the Emergency Flood Damage Reduction Funding Program Agreement between the City of Regina, the Government of Saskatchewan, as represented by the Saskatchewan Watershed Authority. And number 2, that City Clerk be authorized to execute the EFDRP agreement on behalf of the City. So this is a grant for $368,500 from the Government of Saskatchewan so that to help the City of Regina with the management of expenses that was incurred to mitigate flooding risks from Wascana Creek the spring of 2013. There's no conditional requirements for the grant that would inhibit the approval in order for the city to receive the funding. This is here at City Council because it's over $100,000 and we need to approve it here. So this is a us getting money story instead of giving money story.
Always nice to receive money.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilor Bryce. Question or comment on this report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Information reports. If I could have a mover and seconder for both reports, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I've preempted Councilor O'Donnell here on report 63. Sorry.
Not a problem. So this number is 1463. It's an application for discretionary use, a proposed house form commercial office, and the address is 2113 Smith Street. Clearly, Planning Commission looked at this as being an upgrade for the structure, a useful business to be in the area, and we had no issue with this and look for concurrence, please.
Seconder, please. Councilor Young. Comments or questions on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we go to the information reports. We have 2 of them on the RRI Stadium project and the other one on the Regina Region Wastewater Study funding.
I'll move the information reports.
Seconder, please. Seconder. Comments on these reports? Councilor Young, if you could just take the chair for a moment, please.
Your Worship.
On both reports, and I won't go over the details of the fabulous presentation that we had last week on our stadium project. I think it's a signature building in our city and our province, and it really sets the tone for development for downtown. But as in so many cases, Madam Deputy Mayor, we have many people behind the scenes who do a lot of work for us. And I think it's important that we name those people tonight. Some are here, some are not. And I'm going to list them off because they are the ones under leadership primarily of Mr. Schoberg who have brought that project to life and have brought it to fruition. And in a matter of weeks, days, we're going to see the shovel in the ground to a brand new stadium as part of the RRI project. So I'm very proud to stand here, and I'm sure all members of council will be, to hear the names of those people who have done so well for us and done so well for the citizens of Regina and our province. So we have Brent Schoberg, of course. We all know he's the face of this in many ways, but those who stand behind him have done so much work. Louise Folk, Rod Schmidt, Nick Kazilis, Natasha Argue-Fellick, Carrie Powell, Kathy Thorne, Jason Carlston, Mark Yemen, Jane Kruger, Brian Reary, Cheryl Willoughby, Stuart McMillan, Jamie Hansen, Kelly Scher, Thomas Moore, Dustin McCall, Eric Bonk, Chris Smith, Abby Dixon, Rhonda Sulzman, Chris Holden, Mark Sylvester, Sheila Harmachuk, Nathan Morrison, Nicole Hoffert, Desiree Baruthier, Greg Markowicz, Gloria Benhold, Jeff Brown, Tammy Moyes, Ben Mario, Jim Burns, Ted Schaefer, Daryl Maylander, Lorene Anderson, Wendy Domelsky, and Stefan German. I think all members of council perhaps might give a round of applause to thank these people for what they've done for us. Likely there are more people behind the scenes who have done that. These are city staff, and I'm very proud to stand here to say thank you to the staff for a job very well done. The next report is an important report, Madam Deputy Mayor. This is the Regina and Region Water and Wastewater Study funding. This is an important element that is an overlay to our project coming up very shortly on the wastewater treatment plant. This is about sustainable regional economic development with our partnerships around southern Saskatchewan, and the leadership again of many people in our administration. Diane Horlak is certainly one of the leaders of this one. I want to thank you for the work you did. It is showing that we want to work together with our regional partners, and we're making headway. Things are going very well. And on the White Butte Planning Committee, of which Councilor Bryce is on as well, good things are happening. We're showing that we have a sustainable model to help our partners, help them grow as well as us grow together. And that is what it's all about in terms of regional economic development. So both reports, Madam Chair, I'm sure will get concurrence and approval. Thank you. Other comments or questions on those? Councilor Fraser.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So at the last public meeting we discussed the stadium. It was brought up that there's around $47 million worth of contingency built into the funding cap. Is that correct? 47?
Schoberg.
Your Worship, that's correct. The numbers over 30 years have an additional revenue over expense of $47 million.
Okay, and also that about 25 of that had been accounted for already due to interest rates and that sort of thing.
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, that's also correct in terms of our assumptions around the cost of debt financing and expecting some higher costs both for the city loan and as we know already on the provincial loan will eat into part of that $47 million.
Okay, so presuming that there's about $22 million left of contingency, do we have a sense of where we're at with that? Has that number changed at all, or might we expect that the stadium build might actually come in under the presumed cap?
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, the remaining elements, one of the primary factors, of course, will be the city loan. It's an estimate at this point. As we confirm that, we'll be able to finalize that number. The additional elements are actually related to operations and maintenance primarily, and we'll get a better understanding of those once the capital build is complete and we move forward into the operations and maintenance phase. But on the capital portion, we have a fixed price contract, and so that won't change.
Okay, thanks for that. So this is sort of new territory for the city as far as managing a contract like this. Is there any chance that we might have expenses that fall outside of that cap, like either right now or through the build or into the future, that there might be things that aren't included in the hard cap?
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, there are a couple elements to make a note of. The full budget of $278 million includes also the urban planning elements. So we've been doing site preparation work, and there'll be additional elements as we move forward to complete that work. So we'll get a better sense as time goes on that. But at this point, we're on time and on budget for those elements. The other couple primary aspects are the capital and the operations means. I spoke to the capital element. We do have a fixed price contract. What would potentially change there is if there's some form of a change order. If we change our requirements post-contract for the builder, that would certainly have a potential impact on schedule and budget. We're pretty confident that we've done the work that won't be an issue. And as I mentioned as well, the operations and maintenance elements, there are some things yet to be finalized, and we'll get a better sense as time moves on.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the second informational report before us. The $500,000 plus that it took to finance this report, where did that come out of? Is that part of the cap, if I can say, of the wastewater treatment plant funding?
Ms. Horlock?
Through you, Your Worship. The funds came out of the general fund. It was a request of council to do this project. Okay. So it has actually nothing to do with the wastewater treatment plant. It's its own project on its own for the regional program.
Okay, and will the findings of this, sorry, pardon my ignorance here, but the report is finished, is that right?
We're just finalizing it. We're going to another public consultation session with our stakeholder groups that have been working with us on Wednesday, and we plan to bring a report to council at the end of the summer.
And it'll be publicly available once
it comes to council.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other comments or questions on either report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconder.
Second, Your Worship.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, and have a great evening, everyone.